Hi everyone, my name is Vanity Jones. I am one of the students currently taking EDU 208, and obviously we had a project on researching a topic of a school or whatever he gave you. So mine is based off of charter schools. So first of all, a little background. I am studying English, adolescent English, so I want to be an English teacher in high school. And I actually had to look into charter schools anyways because I want to know what kind of school I want to work in the environment that I want to be in. So for this, I really want to focus on what a charter school is, how it is created, and the difference between a charter school and a traditional school, because I believe that a lot of people have misinformation on what a charter school is and the difference between the two. So first of all, a charter school is a public school that is independent of school districts through contracts with state or local boards. So they basically draw up their own contract, and the charter school is accountable for it. So they have to come up with this curriculum and then abide by the contract in the curriculum. And through the contract, it has to be authorized by and some type of authority, so like the state boards or the local boards. Okay, so with that being said, who makes up these contracts on the curriculum and how the curriculum is supposed to be set out and what is the curriculum and stuff like that? So it's kind of like a community thing, I believe, and it's people like teachers or community leaders and people like that come together and create this contract, which is super beneficial to kids because initially these are the people that are in the streets with the kids or home with the kids or teaching the kids and know exactly what they need. So they still have to be like, going with test scores with the city school. I mean, not with the city school, but with the state board, and making sure that they still have the requirements of the state board. But as far as the curriculum, they're able to really be versatile and open and wiggly with it. Okay, so the first law was passed in 1991, which was in Minnesota, and I wanted to just add that because it's 2019, so it's fairly new. It isn't super old. It hasn't been here for our whole lives. It's fairly new, and I believe that this is a great opportunity for upcoming teachers. I really do. So let's just hop right into the differences between the charter schools and the traditional schools. So as we talked about before, there is obviously some misinformation on the students in charter schools, what a charter school is and the difference between a charter school and a traditional school. So one of the differences is the funding. So charter schools are government fundings, but they can also be funded by private fundings too. So I believe they get grants. They can have grants and stuff like that and have people contribute to the school and making sure that they get payment for the schools. They stop funding when they don't meet the requirements for the students in testing and state board. When they don't meet the requirements for the charter and for the contract, they will stop being funded and get shut down. For traditional schools, they have state budget funding, so a lot of the money comes from our taxes, the local taxes, and making sure that they also meet the requirements for testing, and they go based off of testing. Their curriculum is based off of the testing for students. So the government regulations. So for charter schools, it's independently run, but like I said, they must meet standards outlined in their charter in order to secure state funding. So just like I said before, in order for them to have the state funding, they have to abide by the requirements for the curriculum. So they must, even if the curriculum, how they teach the curriculum is completely different than what they must have for the curriculum. Understood? So in the traditional schools, the school board regulations must be met. And it says all school board regulations and laws governed by school districts which implement states. So they must meet the requirements of the school board system. So that's one board system. Whereas the charter school must meet the requirements of parents and teachers and the curriculum that they make up into a contract. and then it's authorized through a local or state board. Okay. As far as having a teacher certification in a traditional school, you must have a teacher certification. That is like a no-brainer. You have to have a teacher certification in order to teach in a city school district. That's across the board. For a charter school, it varies from state to state. I took it upon myself to actually go and apply as a teacher to see if I would be able to get in, even though I'm in a 2-year school. And I just wanted to look at the requirements for each charter school. And through my research, I have found out that for a charter school, you do not have to have a teacher certificate. For the requirements, you do need a bachelor's. And for their summer programs, you have to, if you're still in college, you have to be in your junior year and prepared to graduate in between the next year or the next spring semester. Okay, so their summer program, they offer to college students to teach as if they are the teacher and already have their certificate and bachelor's degree. So I think that that's really cool because that gives you an opportunity to really step your foot into the teaching career. So that's very beneficial. For traditional, you do have to have a state certification, a teaching certification. For charter schools, it's not required. You do not have to have a teacher certification. It will help your application. Some states do require a teacher application. New York State does not require it. Some schools may want you to have it in order to work with them, but it's not required. And you do have to have a bachelor's degree. You also have to have experience. So with that being said, you have a bachelor's degree, and I believe from all the ones that I've applied to, you do need a 2-year experience as well as a bachelor's degree, but you do not need a teacher certification. Okay. So for the curriculum, I think I've mentioned this before, that the curriculum for traditional schools is based off of the testing of each individual student. It's decided by the state education board and it's implemented by the school district. Okay, for charter schools, their curriculum is pretty flexible. So yes, they do have to follow the contract that it is made and created by teachers, parents, even in a group of people, and then authorized by the school education board or school education district or the board or whatever. It is authorized by them, but at the same time, they're very flexible. So however they need the students to learn, they don't have to be stuck on this one thing. It goes back and forth, okay? So it being flexible, if you're teaching about history, for example, and you have to get the information to the kids, it's your way of teaching. So the curriculum isn't just this set standard that this is exactly what needs to be taught and how you teach it. It's up to the teacher because it's based on the students and what they need. The application process, I think, confused a lot of people. So as far as the application process, for public schools, you don't need to fill out an application. You go sign up and then you go to school. They put you in a school, you go to school, and that's the school that you're in. It's different between schools because I know that School of the Arts, you do need an application to get in, but that's more of the high school getting in and auditioning and stuff like that. For the most part, public schools, you do not need an application. You sign up and you go. For charter schools, you do need an application. They also have like a lottery pick. So if it gets to like the applications are more than what can fit in the school, they start picking which ones. You cannot have any discrimination towards race or age or anything like that when it comes to both of the schools. So they're both really sticked on that. They're very together in that. And so you don't need application for traditional schools, but you do need an application for charter schools, but you don't need an entrance exam. So that's something that I wanted to point out. You don't need an entrance exam. You don't need to take an exam to see if you're going to be able to get into the school. Once you fill out the application and you're accepted, you can come to the school. It doesn't discriminate on who you are or what you look like. So that's more for the schools in general. But as far as the teachers, they have different viewpoints of teaching in a charter school and teaching in a traditional school. So these are differences for the teachers, okay? A lot of people believe that charter schools are based, their pay for teachers is a lot better, and I think that's because charter school, to me, it sounds more like private school. So they have to have all this stuff, but it's a public school. And actually, from the reviews that I have looked up and from the differences between the two, for a charter school, a lot of times you're working more and getting paid less than a public school teacher. Okay, so you do get less pay some of the time. Sometimes it depends on where you're at. So sometimes you do get more pay at a charter school than a public school. Okay, but the days that you work are different. So you might work 110 days, whereas a public school teacher would work 180 days. So they're getting more hours anyways, rather than a charter school is getting less hours than them. And with hours, with that being said, sometimes a teacher might spend 8 to 9 hours in a public school, at the school, working on curriculum, working on whatever they need to do for the students, whereas a charter school, you're working up to 12 hours. If that, you're working up to 12 hours figuring out everything. And I think that's based on the curriculum, because they're so flexible. They have to go with whatever that curriculum is that year or those couple of years, and whatever the contract says. So it's taking up a lot of time out of the day, because it might be different last year than it is this year. So it's good that it's flexible for the kids, but I think it overwhelms the teacher. And for public schools, I believe you can get raises, especially how long you've been there, depending on how long you've been there, what you're doing. If you move up in education, and you might start off with a bachelor's degree and then go and get your master's degree, and your pay goes up. Or you might have been there started off 1 year and now you've been there for 30 years and your pay is going up. You get more benefits and stuff like that. But a charter school, they don't have any unions. It's really hard to move up. I feel like it's more like a glass ceiling. With pay, it's harder to move up, and there's no unions, and you really don't have too many opportunities to get a raise. Okay. For the classroom size, I did read a lot about how, and I've heard a lot about how the classroom size is probably smaller in a charter school than it is in a public school. But through research, they're actually the same sizes. There isn't too much of which one is smaller and bigger. It actually has to do with how big the school itself is. So if we have a school that is super big and it's a charter school, and then we have a super big public school, initially they're going to be the same size. So it depends on what charter school and what public school you're talking about, and which the classroom sizes are big or small. Usually they're the same size because they're both public. Okay. For, like I said, I think we touched on requirements for teaching. So charter schools have their own set of requirements and own set of training and regulations. The public schools is set on what you have to do. So like a teacher certification, experience, I think 2 to 3 years of experience, and having a bachelor's degree, preferring a master's degree, and wanting more of that, and getting your master's, them encouraging you to get your master's more is more of a public school. But the charter schools, of course, they want you to do the same, but it varies. The requirements vary. So charter school in Minnesota requirements is completely different than the requirements in Rochester or in New York City. And in Rochester, the requirements for a public school is most likely the same. You still need a teacher certificate, you still need experience, and you still need to have the drive to be a teacher, But for a charter school, it does give you a lot of opportunities, but you might not need a teacher certificate, and then you might need a teacher certificate in New York City. It might not need it here. So that's one thing. And I did read a lot about the loan forgiveness, because going to schools you might have to take out loans. It's very common to take out loans. The loan forgiveness for public schools is the fact that they're working in city schools. So I believe after about 5 to 10 years, you do get a loan forgiveness, and a lot of the loans that you take out for school to become a teacher is forgiven. So you don't have to pay that, or you only will have to pay a portion of it, depending on how many loans and whatever they give you for the loan forgiveness. For a charter school, you may not get to have a loan forgiveness because it is a lot of it that's nonprofit funding, but sometimes it's run by for-profit, and I believe it's 13% of charter schools is run by for-profit organizations. So if that's the case and they say that it was a nonprofit, it's not a city school, you won't get your loan forgiveness. So that's one thing. The teachers in itself, what kind of teachers? It has said that the charter schools have more of a younger, upcoming teachers, and the public schools have like older teachers, ones that have been there for a while, more experience, more education. So a lot of them have their masters. A lot of the charter school teachers are very young, just fresh out of high school or just fresh out of college, and don't have their masters, working on their bachelors, depending on if you're doing the summer program or not. But they do give them a lot of opportunities. So I know for Uncommons, as I was researching about the requirements for a teacher and if you need a certificate, I stumbled upon Uncommons, and they do have a summer program from K through 12 where you're able as a teacher, as long as you're in your junior year of college and you're on track to graduate, and it shows that in your transcripts that you're on track to graduate in the next year. So if I decided that I wanted to go this year in the summertime, I would be on track to graduate with my bachelor's in December 2020 or September or spring 2021. So I would be having to graduate then, and they compensate you for going and teaching these kids in the summertime. Sometimes it's a 6-week program to 12 weeks or 9-week program to 12 weeks, and you be able to teach your own classroom as a teacher even though you're still in college. So it gives you that foothold. Also, for teachers in charter schools, they have more racial diversity. I believe it said it was more Black, Latino, like Hispanic kids or teachers there rather than a city school. They have a lot of more like standard Caucasian women more than women. And there is both that racial difference. So with charter schools, they have more of a diversity. In public schools, they do have diversity, but it's not as much as charter schools. It's more of the standard white woman. They both have really great professional development. So in that, it varies. They have different benefits. So being with the public school, they do help you pay for school if you're in there and you get that that opportunity to have that. They will help you pay for school, just like a charter school would help you and get you a job, but the professional development would be the same. So you would still learn, you still get that experience, you still understand the kids, you figure out if this is really something you want to do or not. And I think that that's super important as well. For as far as the kids, I know it says a lot of stuff like charter schools outperform traditional public schools, but again, that's based off of the difference in the curriculum and what they're doing and how they're doing things in a charter school and how they're based more on tests in traditional schools. As I was reading and trying to figure out whether the teachers were happier at traditional schools and charter schools, a lot of teachers talked about how they felt more secure at a traditional school because of the standard requirements and the not switching and stuff like that, rather than a charter school. It's like going up and down and kind of like a roller coaster, and the curriculum is kind of flexible, so it sometimes can be everywhere, and they kind of point out what the curriculum is, and teachers have to go by that. So they feel more secure at a traditional school than they do at a charter school. But if you're upcoming and you've been in you haven't been in the school yet, a lot of the new teachers that are fresh out of college love the charter schools and would rather be in a charter school than they would be in a traditional school. Okay, so that concludes my research. I will put where I got all this information in my discussion when it's my time to do my discussion. Okay, so that's my little input on, or my little facts and opinion on charter schools and traditional schools. Thank you for watching and have a good day.